Hi, friends. Glad to be back today. And today we're going to be talking about the differences between drama and trauma. And we hear our friends, family members, even coworkers talk about, well, I just can't stand any more drama. I want no more drama in my life. I'm completely allergic to drama. But that's funny. But sometimes we interchange the word trauma with drama. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the differences between the two, how to understand the differences so we have full clarity on this. And joining today with me is Lisa. Lisa is a licensed master social worker, and she's joining me to discuss the differences between trauma and trauma. Great to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
This is great. We've had this discussion on our own before, which has been so fun, because we really have to really dig in deep because there really is very huge differences, but the words do get interchanged sometimes.
Yeah, they certainly do. And I picked up on this many times when people say, oh, they're just all about the drama. And sometimes they are. And sometimes they're talking about something really horrific that's happened to somebody. And I think that's not drama. That's actual trauma. So I think it's important, especially because there's so much trauma going on in our world, that we don't get the two mixed up because they're very different.
I agree with you. And so, Lisa, let's begin this discussion with defining what drama is. Let's talk about drama first. How do we define drama?
So I think of drama as something that is either consciously or subconsciously perpetuated by somebody. People, engage in drama for many reasons. Some are petty. Some are have a more of a deep psychological root to them. But it's something that really is a lot more controlled by a person, that they can perpetuate or not. They can become conscious and aware of and discontinue engaging in it. Whereas trauma is a little bit more, there's a little less power in it, and there's a lot less volition.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I like that. So with drama, I think it's interesting. I think that a lot of folks create drama for many reasons. But let's talk about that. Why would somebody create drama? What's the reasons for that?
Well, I think the pettiness of it, sometimes there's just, mean girls, mean people. People like to be snarky and ugly about other people, a lot of times because they have their own deep unresolved issues, or they even projecting self-hatred onto other people. Then you can get into different reasons like avoiding your life, avoiding what's really matters in your life, not having a deep sense of purpose and direction in your life. So something that people just do, again, consciously or subconsciously, just to avoid their own life, to not address the things that are pressing in their own life. It's a distraction. I think on a more profound level, people engage in drama, because people can get addicted to their own stress hormones, and in that low level sort of excitement, dopamine, anxiety, whatever it is, that people get addicted to that, and it's hard to let go of.
I totally agree with you, and I also feel like sometimes drama is programming. Over time, you've either watched it in the family dynamic, you
Yes.
watched mom create it, or you watched dad create it. And then you don't realize how that impacted you at such a level, and then there you are in that cycle pattern later on in your own marriage, creating that, especially when things are calm,
Right.
or maybe boring.
Yes.
Because sometimes people actually think that the calmness is boring, and there's got to be something's got to happen.
Right.
Or also, I think sometimes people create drama to see how the other person responds. Do they love me? Do they care about me? When they
Absolutely.
start the whole, I'm going to pack up all my stuff and leave. I'm getting a divorce. I'm moving out. And, they get the bags out again and they do the
Yes.
whole thing. And the other person's like, please don't leave me. And they get what they want. They get that supply at the time. And so maybe that's also another reason for drama.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's deep psychological roots and reasons why people engage in it, and that's why there's such a spectrum of why people do. But most of the time, it's perpetuated by yourself. Like when you're talking about family dynamics and early childhood and learned behavior, I think those are more subconscious, unconscious reasons why people do this, and they're not sure why they sabotage relationships, why they can't be at peace, and they feel that peace is boring. That's a very real dynamic there.
Very true. It's interesting. And I find it interesting, too, when folks, they literally start a fight. Everything's been good. Everything's been going very well.
Yes.
And then that's when the fight happens.
Right. Well, that's just that discomfort. I mean, this is when I talk about the flea-ridden couch. It's people that even if they have an opportunity or they're in a great marriage with a great person, they will do that. They'll sabotage, create blow up. They'll they'll create a problem out of nowhere because they're not comfortable with that new, clean, comfy sofa. They feel comfortable at home and familiar with a flea-bitten couch. So they'll go back and they'll try to get themselves back into that state that they're familiar with back in their childhood or early life. And I think this is a dynamic that we see a lot when people are just operating in perpetual dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it. I like your analogy too, the flea-ridden couch. I like that, but it's true. It's like we get comfortable, and sometimes we're very comfortable with what's uncomfortable.
Yes.
But it's become our norm, not our healthy, but our norm. And
it can even be dangerous. I mean, people will go back to things that are very dangerous when they have other options because it is familiar. Mm-hmm. It feels like home to them to be in that state, to have that adrenaline going, to have the fighting. They're not comfortable. They're just not familiar with health.
That's true. That's true. And I know none of us like drama. Some of us do, but I think you're right. Subconsciously, yes. It's something that's subconsciously done. And then you have folks that do kind of stand on the sidelines of life and relish in other people's drama.
Absolutely.
You know, and that also takes, that deflects from their life. So it's a lot easier to look at someone else's problems and dissect their life and yes. their challenges. And it's interesting. I realized years ago when you get on a phone call, and it's interesting, and somehow or not, it diverts into this drama conversation about somebody else. And yes. and I realized it's like I felt like I was sitting on the sidelines at that time. I almost felt like I was talking about like a reality show that I'm not even in. And it was interesting. I was like, I got to get out of these discussions because it's not helping me. But I also realized that even in my own life, anytime that I caught myself talking about somebody else, it was to deflect right. from my own problems.
Right. And avoid. I mean, we all, when we have to do the deep work and you have to mature as a person, just on a basic level.
Adulting.
Yeah, exactly. You face your life and you have to face unpleasant facts. You have to look at yourself squarely in the mirror. And I think it's very uncomfortable for most of us. I definitely did this. I did the helping everyone and their mother. and I thought, I got a lot of identity out of it for a lot of years. And I realized, slowly realized that I was just avoiding myself because I had some really hard things that I had to face and grow, and fixing other people was much easier than fixing myself. So it's a very, very common thing. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but it is something to be aware of. And if you're not aware of it, you can't fix it.
Oh, so. Definitely, and you're right. And we're not trying to guilt anybody. I mean, we've all been. I mean, I at least can say that I've participated in gossip, right? And I have in my life, and I've tried to make a stop to that because I have realized that is deflection, and I've realized that it's something that I don't want to deal with in my life. There's a stressor or something that's causing anxiety, or there's something that I don't have an answer for, and that's kind of the direction you go. And I've realized that when you do find yourself there, if you can kind of recenter yourself and accept that, not guilt yourself, not beat yourself down, but just understand that and say, okay, what is it that I'm trying to avoid?
What's eating Gilbert grape?
Yeah.
That's what I say.
I like that. What is eating Gilbert grape? I love that. So we have the idea of why we participate in drama, why, and why we create that, because it is very subconscious for the most part. Now let's kind of turn the tables around. Let's talk about trauma, because trauma is a very different situation. Sometimes it can be misconstrued or misidentified as drama. And so if somebody is going through trauma and you identify it as drama, that's not only harsh, but it's just completely wrong. And so we really need to look at that. So Lisa, how do we define trauma?
So trauma is a response that we have, body-mind connection response that we have to something terrible that happens. When people mostly think of trauma, they think of war, rape, murder, witnessing something gruesome. And it can be, and it definitely is all of those things. It can, but it's a spectrum. Trauma's on a spectrum, and you can also get traumatized by thinking something happened that didn't actually happen, getting false news. But your body does not know the difference between something that's true and something that's not. So it's really about a state that happens in your body where your systems are all go. Your smoke detector goes off and it doesn't stop. So until you can get into a different state. But it's a physiological, a psychological response to something terrible happening.
Trauma is interesting because there's so many different levels of trauma. Like you said, it's a spectrum of trauma. And you know, some trauma, like you said, is the extreme, the stuff that people normally talk about, right? You know, the fighting in war, you know, seeing people die, you know.
Right.
But trauma, but there's a lot of other types of trauma. And sometimes the trauma can be not what actually happened, but on the other side of it, it could be something that actually didn't happen.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Sure. I think a good example of that is in childhood, children can be traumatized by extreme neglect, not having parents engaged, being just absent, either emotionally, physically absent. Extreme neglect, I think, is the best example that springs to mind about something not being there that can traumatize a child, because children we're wired for connection. You know, and I think that another point you made along those lines is that we are naturally wired to connect and to be connected, especially as children when you're dependent. And I think trauma, one of the terrible things about trauma is that it rewires you for survival. So that becomes your number one inclination, is to survive rather than to connect. And that's where a lot of the problems with trauma and the issues that people experience post-trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, things, because your body gets rewired.
Because it's no longer trying to connect, or it's no longer trying to have that connection. Now it's just, I just have to survive.
Right.
Whatever
Well, that
I
becomes
have
the
to do.
primary. So we still desperately need to connect, because that's just a human, it's a basic human need. But our bodies are wired, now our brain is rewired to survive. So survival becomes more important than connecting when you need the two things at the same time, and they sometimes conflict. You know, it's hard to connect when you're trying to survive, and people don't understand why people do what they do post-trauma. So
it's interesting, and you know, in trauma, you know, to me, and it was interesting you brought up the fact that it could be even something that you believe that might not have even happened.
Sure.
And a good example that I've come across multiple times is dealing with parents telling their kids something, or grandparents telling their kids something that happened that did not take place in their childhood,
Oh, yes.
and then the child believing
Yes.
as if it did, and then kind of owning that, and even though the trauma didn't happen, they still believed it.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of research on this, actually, installing false memories. I mean, you see this in parental alienation cases, in divorce, where people disparage the other parent. If you, in extreme cases, you see people lie about the other parent or try to install memories, especially in those vulnerable ages around 3, 4, 5, where memories are already foggy. But there's a lot of research on this, and it's not very difficult to do that. And it's unfortunate, because you can definitely convince a child or even adults that something happened to them that did not, in fact, happen, and that can create a traumatic experience for them, because their mind and their body are connected. And if their mind believes that, because an authority figure convinces them, then they will start to experience the symptoms as if it actually happened.
It's so true. It's so true. It's interesting how powerful the mind is. But you're right. It's like if somebody tells you something, especially if you're very young, it's very impressionable. Especially if you look up to that person, very impressionable. But also if something's repeated multiple times. Think about how, you know, some of the most negative things that we were told growing up, you know what I'm saying, and how that actually got down into those they created those core wounds and creates these beliefs. But it's like if you were to what was that, install false
memories.
Okay, install false memories in a situation. I mean, the power that has, and how the brain works,
Yes.
automatically takes it on as its own, as if the situation really took place.
Yes, it's a really, really sad and sort of malicious thing that goes on, but it can be traumatic for sure.
We should talk about that
Yes.
in a video too. We should discuss that. I think that's
Yes.
something that's interesting, because unfortunately, things aren't perfect, right? And we're not in a perfect world. And so unfortunately, people take advantage of things for their own, whatever they want out of it, right? Whatever they're needing. And you're right, that could be a very interesting long topic to discuss.
Absolutely.
So obviously there's many differences between drama and trauma. And so, you know, when somebody talks about their trauma, and I think, you know, this is kind of a segue, or somebody brings that up, how are we able to, as a friend, maybe even discuss that or connect with that? Or what is some advice when you hear something of that magnitude from someone?
I think it's just the awareness is the main thing. If you're aware of the differences between drama and trauma, you can avoid mislabeling things. So there's when someone has gone through something horrific like losing a child or a parent or rape or something just really horrible, and you say, oh, they're just being dramatic, or oh, they're just always drama, drama, drama. That's just not accurate. It's just not true. Trauma is a really horribly difficult thing to deal with and overcome, usually that a person didn't ask for. Many times had nothing to do with it. It was put upon them. They had no control over it. So to label something like that as dramatic is extraordinarily insensitive at minimum. And damaging at worst. So I think it's something that the more people are aware of it, the less you can, just add sorrow upon sorrow. And I think that's important as a human, to be aware of that. And then also labeling drama trauma. It's minimizing the genuine suffering that people experience, and sort of putting it on level with something that, one you can avoid generally if you're aware of it and you want to, and the other one you generally can't, and you just have to deal with, and now you have to take responsibility for.
Very true. And I think also being appropriate when if somebody does reveal a trauma to you, to understand how to appropriately respond to that, and I'm not talking about from a therapist or counselor position, but as a friend, family member, it's not something that you say, just get over it, or, you got to be very delicate with the way that you discuss that. And I think also, also listening to them, listening to them, having an open ear, being there, being compassionate, letting someone know that you don't have all the answers, and then also allowing them to know that, yes, it's okay for them to get help. It's okay for them to find somebody that might specialize in trauma, like Lisa,
Sure.
That's what you do. And it's and it's interesting, like somebody that specializes that and helps somebody get over that and be able to live their life again. Because, when you have trauma and you have unprocessed trauma, you really are shackled to that trauma.
Absolutely. And it is very difficult to face. And the research is just catching up. It hasn't been well researched until the last probably 10 years. So there's a lot of research coming out, but it hasn't been something that's been addressed. All the combat veterans, that came back years ago from war didn't have the resources we have now, but we're very young in the research of it. But we are so far from where we were 10, 15 years ago. So that's the good news. But definitely, just having basic compassion and empathy, if you can, will go a long way. And just understanding that's a very, very complex topic, that even the experts just go back and forth, on the experts that are, in their 70s, 80s even now. There's still so many ideas about it and how to help. So it's super complex. It's a super complex thing. But compassion and not having all the answers and letting people know that it's okay to not be okay for a moment, and just sort of sitting there and holding the space for people, sometimes it's just the best response. Because very few people are really a trauma expert, even the experts.
Exactly. That's great. Lisa, thanks so much for coming on. I can't wait to have you back.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you're willing to come back on.
Absolutely.
So I hope that this video has helped, because I think that understanding the difference between trauma and trauma is so powerful. Being able to help those that we're around and be able to understand that. So we'll be doing more videos together as well, and really connecting with this topic and various topics to explore, because, knowledge is power. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, give us a like on this video if you've liked this or it's helped you in some way. And in the comment section below, if you have a question for Lisa about trauma, if you'd like to ask her a question, you can definitely do that right here. We're going to be doing a lot more videos, as well as maybe any topics that you would like us to have discussed. And we'll definitely take heed of that as well. Thanks again for tuning in, and don't forget to live your true life.